I think the Vikings signed their starting guard, Jesse Davis from Miami. We'll talk about it and answer all your questions here on Twitter Tuesday here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Ooh-wee!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, every single day. And today is Twitter Tuesday, which means we're answering your questions. Y'all sent me questions on Twitter as well as email. There's a Google form in the show notes. If you would rather do that, you can send me a question anytime. So I got a big old collection here. And the first one concerns today's biggest news. The Vikings signed 3 new players. Jesse Davis, a guard, I guess, swing lineman from Miami, Nate Hairston, and they re-signed Ty Smith. Both of those guys are cornerbacks. Nate Hairston and Ty Smith are probably more, we don't know if they're going to make the team type, so I'm not going to go too in-depth on them. But Jesse Davis, everybody wants to know about Jesse Davis. The first person who wants to know about Jesse Davis is Vikings theorist, who asked, is it time to overreact about Jesse Davis starting for the Vikings? If we can overreact to the possibility of, like, the likelihood of Jesse Davis starting for the Vikings. According to Chris Thomason, that is the odds-on favorite outcome. Sounds like he will have, formally, it'll be a competition between Wyatt Davis, Jesse Davis, maybe Oli Udoh in there, and everybody will compete, and maybe they'll split some reps. But it seems like Jesse Davis will maybe be the one who starts out in pole position and gets those first team reps, and then whatever happens over camp happens. He started for 5 years. He's played a lot for Miami, so he has definitely plenty of veteran experience, and he's played at 4 of the 5 positions along the offensive line. A lot of left tackle, right tackle, both guard spots. Hasn't played center, but that's it. So you've got a lot of versatility, and that's why the Vikings gave him a $3 million contract that has, I think, $1.5 million. Like half of his contract is in a signing bonus, which is, I think, an indicative move. It's $3 million is not a ton on the salary cap. That's not, I don't think that's going to be the difference between being able to get a guy signed or not. And it is just a 1-year deal. So it's certainly not breaking the bank kind of money, but it is starting money. It indicates we can use that contract and read into the Vikings' intention here. And their intention is Jesse Davis starts at right guard. So we should probably talk about him in a little bit more depth. I might get into more depth tomorrow, but for now, what I'm getting is Dolphins fans hate this dude. Oh my God, Dolphins fans hate this dude. I actually was talking to Travis Wingfield, who used to do Locked On Dolphins. It's Kyle Krabs over there now, and he does a great job. But Travis Wingfield, who covers the Dolphins now for his Drive Time podcast, was talking about him and was just like, yeah, this dude is one of the worst offensive linemen I've ever covered. So, and a lot of Dolphins fans say that. They talk about it. If you take a Dolphins fan tweet about Jesse Davis, remove the name Jesse Davis, and put in Dakota Dozier, it would all track and make sense. So they hate this dude. And I was looking into it, and it seems like most of the most embarrassing things that have happened to him at the tackle spots. And it seems like he is just not a tackle. He sets wrong all the time. He doesn't really manipulate that space very well. He doesn't time his hands very well at all. And then at guard, it's a little easier. He can set up a different house. I don't love the base he sets up. I'll talk more tomorrow probably about it in depth. But he doesn't have to time his punch as much. Inside at guard, it's a phone booth. Guys are just in your face right away. You're not, they're not trying to set you up and run around the edge, and you don't know when they're going to come. You're not trying to lunge. It's just mano-a-mano. 2 big guys push on each other. And I think that seems like he's better at that game than he is at the tackle game. So that's what I'll tell myself for now. We'll get into a little bit more depth about it later. But either way, it's not, he's not Brandon Scherf, man. He's not one of the premier guards out there, but it seems like he's going to start. And hopefully that works out. Hopefully moving him to guard and keeping him at guard is where he's at his best. And that sounds like that's the Vikings' plan. In a similar vein, Swede Skull asks, what does swing tackle look like for us right now, other than this potential revolving door? Referring to Jesse Davis, I posted a clip of him getting killed by Brian Burns at tackle. So swing tackle might be Jesse Davis. It could be Oli Udo as well. That's probably what it looks like for us right now. That's something, that would be the 4th-round tackle type thing I could totally see, or the $1 million bring Rashad Hill back kind of move, or somebody of that same caliber. But right now, yeah, the swing tackle backup position is probably somebody not very good at the sport. But I mean, that's swing tackle is a backup position. You're not going to get a starting quality player. If they were starting quality, they'd be starting somewhere and they wouldn't be available to be your backup, Waka Waka asks, are the Vikings setting themselves up for a situation where they might not be comfortable going BPA in the draft by not addressing the secondary? And I'm going to answer the next one in tandem because it's about the same question. Kyle Slaby asked, the hope is to have as many good players at as many different positions as you can. I get that, but if the Vikings roll into training camp with Dantzler as CB2, can they build a playoff caliber roster this year, or is Dantzler's floor too low to rely on? I think as cornerback 2, teams have gotten away with worse than Dantzler, but you need a cornerback 1. If Dantzler's your cornerback 1, I think you're just so weak on the outside that everything that happens in the front kind of doesn't matter. They can just throw over the top of everything and you're just kind of screwed. But that leads me back to Waka Waka's question, which is, well, are they setting themselves up to be, priced in taking a corner in the draft? Maybe, but the board is setting up to stress that really, really hard. There is a decent chance that we're sitting there at 12 and we're choosing between, Andrew Booth or Derek Stingley, and we don't know about his medicals, and some like super blue chip edge rusher out of Georgia or something like that. So, or somebody like Jordan Davis, who doesn't fill a need at all, but oh my God, he's good. And you're really, really, really going to be choosing between guy at a position in need that's not as good and guy not at a position in need that's way, way, way better. For me, I say pick the defensive tackle and figure out a way to use them all. Run a lot of bear fronts or something. I don't know. Figure out a way to get all these guys on the field if they're that good. Present your own challenge, instead of trying to do the best version of someone else's challenge. But if they are just so screwed at corner that no matter what you do on the front, they're just going to throw it over the top of you all the time, then maybe they are going to be stuck in that spot. Now, I believe you can start betting on the draft pretty soon here at BetOnline. If not, you can bet on college basketball. The tournaments are getting down to it, so you can bet on all of those. You can bet on golf or tennis or MMA. You can even play your favorite Vegas casino games. Whatever it is, you can find it at betonline.net. You can use their player props builder to make all sorts of weird parlays. You can use their live betting apparatus, whatever you think of. So head on over to betonline.net, get yourself a Grambling. BetOnline, where the game starts. Hey, you can find me and my good buddy Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints making fun of the Falcons and how bad they are, and I get some good shots in at the Bears too over at Locked On NFL. Check that out on YouTube too. We're on YouTube. The tinfoil hat made an appearance, so yeah, go check that out. Moving on with the mailbag, Alexander the Dane asks, which of the following second-year players do you predict will have the best chance for a breakout year similar to KJ Osborne? Janarius Robinson, Patrick Jones, Amir Smith-Marset, or Kene Wangu? So I kind of want to take Kene Wangu out of this because he already got 2 kick return touchdowns. That feels like he already had his moment, right? And anything more is gravy, but he kind of already had. Like KJ Osborne came out of nowhere. We didn't think he was rosterable. And then he came out of nowhere and won wide receiver 3 job. Like I thought he was an afterthought to make the roster, and maybe we'll put him on the practice squad again, but he had already busted because he was so unreasonably bad in 2020. And then he came back and like had that improvement. So I don't think Wangu is bad enough right now to count. Janarius Robinson would be I think I'm going to go with Janarius Robinson because at least Patrick Jones and Amir Smith-Marset got in the games and Janarius Robinson got hurt. So he's the guy we all forgot about, right? And then he can come back and actually have it. I think he would have to be the one. In terms of who can put up a second year close to the second year that KJ Osborne had, I think it's Amir Smith-Marset because he's already shown enough of a skill set where he can like have a decent wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 role. You can put him on the field and not feel like he's going to run the wrong route or something like that. And that's a big step for rookies, and he's already taken it. So I'll go with Amir. But I think Janarius Robinson would be the only one that feels as out of nowhere as the KJ Osborne one did. Devin Rubnik asks, would you rather the Vikings re-sign Patrick Peterson or instead bring in 2 more cornerbacks who are younger but mostly unproven? I don't want young and unproven. We have a lot of young and unproven already. We got Dantzler and, we've got Shannon Sullivan is young. We've got, I think he's 25, 26. He's pretty young. We've got a lot of unproven players. Give me a veteran that we know can play. So I would take Patrick Peterson. And I don't think he's going to carry that hefty of a price tag. So I'm kind of working that in as well. But yeah, I don't want more unproven corners. We need dudes who can play, not dudes who maybe can play 2 years down the road. We got enough of that. Ryder Jensen asks, after seeing the early moves of Kwesi, I feel like the old regime wasn't doing that bad. Do you feel all the negative talk about Rick and Mike might be overdone? It's not like we went 0-16 for 8 years. Yeah, sometimes you would think, right? This is natural. Yes, I do. I think it is totally overblown. Always. But always, like, this is just the process. When somebody gets fired, everything they did is wrong. What I'm surprised about is it seems like the team is falling into this trap. Fans fall into this trap all the time. Look at any fan base, any year, the year after they fire a coach. It was all the old dude's fault. Everything was the old dude's fault. Every single, like, things he had nothing to do with. Like, Mike Zimmer had nothing to do with the offensive line, like, training, right? That, if anything, you could blame Rick Spielman for that, for sure, for like an evaluation thing, or you could blame Mike Zimmer. Maybe he should have been more hands-on, or he didn't have that skill and that's a problem or whatever. But people will so directly be like, Mike Zimmer got in there and he ruined Drew Samia. It's like, you have no evidence of that. That's just sour grapes on the old guy. But I think with Rick, too, I mean, yeah, there were definitely problems in evaluation, and I think there were some philosophical things. We've talked about it. But Kwesi is taking a very similar approach, the second wave free agents, and watch him trade down a bunch in the draft and get a bunch of 7th round picks and all that stuff. It is a lot of similarities. And my conspiracy here, well, I'm going to save it. It's going to come later in the show, but I might put on the tinfoil hat a little later. Year Moam asks, if the pass rushing tandem of Smith and Hunter is as good as it seems it could be, then it obviously has great implications for the secondary. What does a fearsome pass rush mean for the coverages a Fangio defense would run behind them? And are there any implications for the kinds of corners we could live with if they can't or don't get anybody better than a dude back there? Okay, so here's the landscape of corner right now. If you get a cheap corner, they can probably play decently click and close zone. That's a pretty common skill set among corners, that you can play zone coverage and you can watch the ball and you can jump on it. A lot of them did that in college and even in high school. If you have good corners, if you have dogs back there, an actual secondary made up of players who can play, you can play man coverage. Fangio defenses are better when they can play man coverage because it frees up all of those players to really maximize pass rushes like what we'll have with Za'Darius Smith and Danielle Hunter. It can be slower to beat those man coverages. You have to run longer routes. You have to spend more time setting up a corner. Whereas in zone, if you diagnose what that coverage is pre-snap, then you can have a 1-step and throw, 3-step and throw kind of game that totally neutralizes a pass rush. And the only way to beat it is to play man coverage. But if you play man coverage and you don't have good corners, you're just going to end up giving up big plays instead. So it puts you in this really tough place. So if they don't have good corners, they're playing zone. And if they do have good corners, they're playing man and they're really unleashing those guys. So it's all symbiotic, right? If you have a good pass rush, you might be able to get away with putting bad corners in man and hoping it just takes too long to get away from them. But if you have good corners, you can really, really maximize that pass rush. And then it turns into a weapon instead of a shield, if that makes sense. Ragnar's Ghost asks, how does the Tyreek Hill trade affect the Vikings, if at all? So I don't think it does at all. Obviously, AFC, we don't really care what happens to the AFC, right? But what it would maybe do is because he got a big extension with Miami now, it might affect like Justin Jefferson's extension. But I really struggle to see a world where Tyreek Hill getting a giant extension, be it from Miami or Kansas City, doesn't happen before Justin Jefferson gets his extension. So that was going to have influence to the market by then anyways, and I don't think we care if it's Miami or Kansas City that does it. So there's a bunch more questions in this mailbag. I want to make sure I get to all of them. But first, let me talk to you about your car. Snowstorms come out of nowhere. This is that time of year where we're like, oh yeah, it's finally over. Winter's finally done. And then it comes and just dumps on us. And you do not want to get stuck, especially if you blow a tire or something in the middle of the road, and it's cold out or something like that. Get a tire kit in your car. And you can get that at rockauto.com. You can get anything you need for your car at rockauto.com, including like pretty much any part a mechanic will install. If you need a part replaced in your car, order that thing from rockauto.com. Otherwise, you're paying 30, 50, maybe even 100% more for that part. Order it on rockauto.com, take it to the mechanic, and then they'll say, we'll just install this for you, and you can save $1 doing that. So head on over to rockauto.com. In the How You Heard About Us section, whatever you buy, make sure you let them know that Locked On sent you, because if you don't, the rabbits will come to your home and they will rob you blind. Rock Auto, amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Let's move on with this mailbag. The next one comes from Nolan, who asks, am I the only one who thought the ooh-wee in the show's intro was from Rick and Morty? That's Kirk Cousins doing his impression of ooh-wee from Rick and Morty. Yeah, that's what that is. And there's one YouTube commenter who hates that ooh-wee, and I'm sorry I'm forgetting your name, but I'm not sorry because I'm sorry I'm never taking it out, buddy. You're just gonna have to deal with it. Next one comes from Mikhail Skolachev, I love that, who asks, do you think the schedule this year is looking a little soft, or is it just me? So I think this probably comes from, I think somebody, was it Dustin Baker? Somebody posted the slate of quarterbacks that the Vikings are looking at right now. Don't fall for it. We do this all the time, right? The strength of schedule. I'm not a big fan of raw strength of schedule. Like, schedule strength will influence you if you're gonna try to scramble it or something, and work it into your math. If you're gonna try to do math, but for me, look, you lose games to good quarterbacks, to bad quarterbacks. You beat good quarterbacks all the time. The Vikings fans of anyone should know, having the better quarterback in a matchup does not guarantee that you win. We have been down that road a whole bunch of times. So, yeah, sure, they've got a lot of games. I mean, you got 2 Bears games, 2 Lions games, and those rosters are a wasteland right now. You've got maybe one of the easier divisions that you're going in. Like, yes, you could totally talk yourself into it. But also, somebody's going to draft Malik Willis. That team might be on the roster. Somebody is going to draft Malik Willis. That team is going to be on the schedule maybe. And if they are, maybe Malik Willis is good or whatever other rookies. So, ask this same question in 3 months. Ask this same question in 6 months when we're in the middle of the season. But personally, I like to take it game by game anyways and not really get too bogged down in the super zoomed out version of it. And I just like to get more specific and, kind of take each week as it comes. I feel like that brings me more closely aligned to actual NFL teams. Jeremy Eversvik asks, in a competitive rebuild year, is the best move in the draft to draft the highest wide receiver on our board at number 12? Feels like top wide receivers tend to contribute as rookies more than any other position, and Fangio's system downplays cornerback? So I super disagree with that. Fangio's systems they can downplay cornerbacks, but then they're running the lesser versions of themselves. So you definitely need cornerbacks. So I would say if you are trying to maximize the utility of your draft pick to winning this particular year, and I don't think that's competitive rebuild. That would be more like all-in win now Ramsey, which the Vikings are not. They're not the Los Angeles Rams. Then I would say you're probably going to trade up and get your favorite corner. For most people right now, that's Sauce Gardner. Go get him, right? Go trade up to 6. Who cares? Get him. But I think a quote-unquote competitive rebuild just means we want to fix the problems on the roster, and we're just not going to tank beforehand. And if you've been listening to this show, you know that I don't think you have to tank beforehand. I don't think picking 12th versus picking 6th is going to be the difference here. If there's a quarterback and the difference is that you needed to move up 6 spots, but then you weren't willing to give up the future picks to move up for that quarterback, you're just an idiot. The difference isn't, we won too many games, now we couldn't get our quarterback. The difference is we weren't willing to give up future draft picks and we couldn't get our quarterback. Or we won too many games, we had to give up a little more draft capital to get our quarterback. And, that's marginal. Yes, drafting higher is better. We all know that. But I think a lot of people, I see a lot of it, especially in these mailbags. A lot of people want the word rebuild to mean we trade away Kendricks, we trade away Daniil Hunter, we get rid of everybody, everything is gone, and then we're going to be a poverty franchise for 5 years, and then at the end of that 5 years, we get 2 top 5 draft picks, and then we do it. And it's like, this is a Madden strategy. Everybody's fired by the time you do this. So a competitive rebuild means we're going to be respectable, but we also understand that we aren't going all in here. We're not going to start trading all of our picks for Jalen Ramsey's. Sports Boy asks, why can't we seem to land a decent offensive lineman? Is there something unique about this team that would deter an intermediate to high quality guard or tackle? This is it. We're getting so close to people just admitting that we all have cold Omaha syndrome. That's what I say about, there is this weird thing that whenever somebody leaves the Vikings or doesn't come to the Vikings, people are like, they just hate. And it's like this weird self-deprecating, well, we're just a flyover state, It's just this Midwest, we're this small little market. They really wanted to go to Chicago or New York or LA, the real big. And it's like, that's not what's happening here at all. It's just somebody got outbid or something like that. Look, the free agent market's hard. They want a lineman, they lose the bidding war. Maybe somebody paid more than you were willing to pay, and maybe you stand by that decision. Maybe you say, hey, I would have paid $5 million for that guy, but you paid $7 million and I wasn't willing to do that. And that's just how it goes. This is not free agency is a world where you go 1 in 99 and you only get one guy and you put in for 100 guys. It's just that kind of world. But here's the deal. when it comes to offensive linemen. We have to reset. Everything reset. Every mistake Rick Spielman made with offensive line is now in the past and no longer has a bearing on the current Vikings. Except, I guess, like the actual scouting staff. And if you wanted to blame the scouting staff, that would be a more reasonable take. But there's there's not a curse about purple that makes you bad at offensive linemen. Maybe that was, and Spielman was here for 16 years, so it's been a while. And back then, by the way, we were getting Steve Hutchinson's when he first got there. So maybe it was just a Spielman thing. I just want to encourage people to reset everything. We are no longer the bad offensive line team. It has now just been one bad offensive line offseason. If it even is one. Hey, maybe Jesse Davis totally kills it at right guard. Who knows? Sport News asks, on a scale of 1 to 10, how on board are you with a round 1 wide receiver? Sure. I'm not going to do a scale of 1 to 10. Tell me a guy. A wide receiver. Who's a wide receiver? Is that Olave? Is that Jameson Williams? Is that some guy we're reaching on in the third? Who is it? Tell me that, and then I'll give you where I put them on my board. And here's my strategy for the draft, and I won't be done with this until like the eve of draft night, but I will do a horizontal board where I take every prospect and I say I would take this guy at 12, but I wouldn't trade up for him, or I wouldn't take this guy at 12, but if we traded back, to the 20s, I would take him there, that kind of thing. And so, like, I had Christian Darrisaw. I said I wouldn't take Christian Darrisaw at 14, but if they traded back past 20, I would be okay with it, and that's exactly what happened, that kind of thing. So tell me the guy. A wide receiver, I don't know, is he a big one, a short one, a fast one, a quick one? Is he good? Like, does he catch, or does he have the dropsies? Is there an injury? Who is it? And that is going to, like, drastically change how I feel about a wide receiver. A generic wide receiver means nothing to me. That could be Scotty Miller, or it could be Julio Jones. Who knows what that is? Brandon Fisher asks, where do you stand on the student loan forgiveness debate? I think Joe Biden should forgive Rastapasta's student loans specifically, and you can clip that. Purple Velour asks, what is your most galaxy-brained take about the Vikings team that you will defend forever? Okay, so this is what I wanted to get to. My greatest conspiracy, I'm putting on the tinfoil hat for it. For those who aren't watching on YouTube, that's real tinfoil right there, all right? We're putting it on. The Vikings will not win a Super Bowl until they go back outside. When the Vikings took down the Metropolitan Stadium and they built the Metrodome and became a dome team, they doomed themselves to heartbreak and disappointment and stagnation forever. And then they built another indoor stadium. They must become a winter team again, or they will never, ever win the Super Bowl. That is my take that I will defend forever. Luke Shimshak asks, trading up for Sauce, will it be done? I think you have to decide when, right? Trading up one spot for Sauce Gardner, I think most people can get on board with that. Trading up 7 spots for Sauce Gardner, that becomes a little more debatable. How far does he have to go? If Sauce Gardner goes first overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars, wouldn't happen. But if they did, no, then we're not trading up to first overall, right? But if he falls to 8, we're thinking about it, right? Or if he falls to 7, are we still doing it? And, probably doesn't make it past the Giants, I don't think. So maybe we have to get up to 6. What does the board look like? That's how you have to think about this question. Gritty Kirk asks, why no JC Treader? Because you guys tweeted about him too much. I'm sorry. You doomed it to never happen because you guys wouldn't shut up about the one specific interior offensive lineman, and then they went and got a different interior offensive lineman, and now we're all disappointed. You have nobody to blame but yourself. Peter Sevig asks, I think trading for an established corner would be fun, but what are some realistic options if they decide to go that route? So the big one would be James Bradbury. He's on the block. He's got kind of a rough contract. He would come in at like a $13 million cap hit, and then he's got it's sort of like Danielle Hunter's where he's got a weird cheap year next year. So you have to like work that out and even that contract out, and that might just be a restructure with a couple void years. It might be a truer extension. But because of that issue, you could probably get him for less draft capital. So it could be the kind of thing where you trade for a 4th round pick and then try to figure out the contract from there. And if you can figure out the contract, you might end up with some pretty good value on your hands. So Bradbury, I guess, is the name that's in my mind for that. But sometimes it's a guy you never even thought was on the block. So it could kind of be anyone. Ryan asks, from Friday's episode, you explained not likely to be earned and likely to be earned as if the salary cap were a sentient being. What form does this cap monster take? Oh, man. Okay. Reality Stone Twisted Thanos. That's what it's going to be, because it is a beast you have to fight. It is a beast you can defeat if everybody works together and if the power of friendship takes over. But ultimately, you have to be willing to give up your concept of reality and accept a new one. 5 a.m. tweeter asks, I'm already burnt out of the Will Smith memes, but I'm oddly excited for the reference memes in the future. Is that weird? No, that seems very human. For those who are living under a rock, Will Smith slapped Chris Rock in the face at the Oscars, and it was wild. Google it, you'll find it. King Squeaks similarly asks, pick a side, Will Smith or Chris Rock. My side is, oh my God, I don't care. It was kind of funny, and that's it. And we do not need to discuss it further. It was just like, what? That was kind of funny. Smith's Stan account asks, best Shrek movie. Oh, it's got to be the first one. Shrek 2 is a great movie, but the first one, I mean, is untouchable, I think. That is a classic. I would sit down and watch that movie right now, like any day. You let me know, and I'm in. We're watching Shrek. Mayo Coffee finally asks, what's scarier, a skeleton or a goblin? This depends, because goblins can be, I mean, are we talking like the Harry Potter goblins that like run banks? Oh, man, that's weird. That didn't age great. But is it that kind of, like, that's like just a person with like a kind of ugly face, but otherwise like has a regular job in society? Or are we talking like Lord of the Rings goblins, where they're these like feral things that just want to like eat your throat? And then, a spooky skeleton is pretty spooky. But I think if it's the Lord of the Rings goblins, I fear the thing that fears nothing, and that feels like the goblin. Like a skeleton, what's a skeleton gonna do? If it's not armed, it's just a big old pile of bones. I got more muscle than that. Like, by definition, because I'm a living human, I'm going with a goblin. Tomorrow on the show, we'll talk a little more about Jesse Davis and whatever else comes up in the news cycle. We'll keep doing prospect of the day and all that stuff, so we will get into all of that. In the meantime, check out the Locked On NFL Draft podcast so you can get to know more about some of the questions that I raised, like what are the wide receivers like and stuff like that. Go check it out. I will see you all tomorrow, and as always, Skol.